I have a couple pounds of some really nice Regent grapes. My vine is only a few years old and it's just starting to produce. It's not enough to make a good full-bodied gallon of red wine, but I'm hoping it's going to be enough to make a gallon of some nice blush or rosé, whichever you prefer. So what I'm going to do is start out with these 2 pounds of nice clean Regent grapes. They're a European hybrid wine grape, so I'm really interested to try them even though I don't have very many. I'm going to have to add 1 crushed Campton tablet, 1 teaspoon of yeast nutrient, and 1/2 teaspoon of pectic enzyme powder, along with a good amount of sugar, which I have yet to determine the amount. What I'm going to do is take these grapes, crush them best I can, and I'm going to put them in the sanitized nylon mesh bag. It's a little stained. It's been used before for brewing and winemaking to contain my fruit. And this has all been sanitized with a sulfite solution. I crushed up a sulfide tablet with some water. Sanitize that in my little sample glass and hydrometer. So I'm going to dissolve some sugar in some water. I'm going to start out with about 2 cups. And after I get my grapes crushed, add my sugar and water. I'll take some measurements, try to calculate how much sugar I'm going to need. The goal is to reach about 12 to 13% potential alcohol, which is around 1.094 on the hydrometer specific gravity scale. So I'm going to get started crushing my grapes. Get some sugar dissolved in some water. Get my sulfite, yeast nutrient, and pectic powder added. The grapes have all been crushed and placed in the nylon mesh bag, tied shut. I've been adding sugar and water, trying to get my gravity up where I need it. What I do is dissolve my sugar in some water in the microwave, and then I'll add cold water to cool it down. I'm trying to get a little over a gallon in this bucket. So after I pull the fruit out and rack it, I still want to have a gallon left. And I'm going to transfer it into glass gallon jugs in about a week or two. See how long it takes. This will have to sit overnight, and tomorrow is when the yeast will go in. The final gravity is approximately 1.094, which is the minimum I'd like to see. It's around 12% alcohol. I probably added just a little too much water. Would have been higher. I want to make sure I have a good gallon in here after I pull that bag out. It looks like it's going to be a very light colored wine. It's sort of a pinkish brown, which is typical for grape juice until it's had time to soak in some of the color from the skins, which are all nicely contained. So I'm going to put a lid on this thing and leave it lightly covered overnight, and then tomorrow get the yeast put in it. Have the lid snapped on the fermenter. Now I'm just going to take a little piece of paper towel and just cover that little hole just so the insects will stay out of it. Any passing fruit flies or anything like that. And that'll allow any of the sulfite gas in there to escape. I bought this 2-gallon fermenter just for this project actually. It's a 2-gallon food grade bucket. If you don't have a 2-gallon fermenter, you can always break up the batch into 2 1-gallon containers. But you definitely need some head space. So I have about that much head space for bubbling, foaming. That's more than I probably need. But it should make a good 1-gallon batch of wine. I'll pitch the yeast in it tomorrow. It'll probably ferment for a week or two and get transferred into a glass gallon jug. So I guess that's all for now. Oh, I did use 4 cups of sugar was what it ended up taking. So it's 2 pounds of grapes and 4 cups of sugar. It's been 24 hours now since the pectic enzyme and the sulfites and the yeast nutrient were added to the grapes, sugar, and water. And it's time to put some yeast in. The sulfites should have dissipated enough by now to the point where wine yeast can tolerate them. I'm going to use some Lalvin EC1118. You can use any good wine yeast. This particular one needs to be rehydrated in about 50 milliliters of water for 15 minutes. So I'll just let that sit there for 15 minutes. And then I'll add the yeast to the bucket. The yeast has been rehydrating now for over 15 minutes. It looks like it's ready to go. Pour it in the must here. Now the pectic enzymes acting on the grapes makes for some strange looking things sometimes. So there's a film on the surface, but that's nothing to worry about. Stir that in. Wine's already getting a little purple color. Doesn't look like much. It should turn into some nice wine. Put a lid on this and insert my airlock, put some water in it. And I should have some bubbles in the near future. It's been 24 hours since the yeast was pitched in. Getting about 1 bubble every 4 or 5 seconds. I normally make 5-gallon batches. They can bubble more than a bubble a second. So I guess 1 every few seconds is pretty good for just 1 gallon. Well, this thing's going to have to sit. I might shake it up a little bit now and then, keep the yeast going. But until the bubbles quit, there's not a whole lot else to do. It's been 2 days now since the yeast was added. Second day of fermentation. My bubbles had slowed down some, so I suspect it's time to stir. This fruit always tends to float to the top, so many grape wines you want to punch this down twice a day. You can do this once a day or more or less often. So I'm going to try to keep the skins all nice and moist and get all that good color out of it. You can see it's already got quite a bit of color for only having 2 pounds of grapes. Get this good and wet, stir it around a little bit, get the yeast up and moving. And then I'm going to cover it back up. Check it tomorrow. Stirring the skins down and working everything up really increased my bubble rate here. Looking good. It's been 4 days since the yeast was put in. Despite lots of shaking and stirring, I haven't seen any activity in the airlock today. So I believe that it's only 4 days that it's done fermenting. I'm used to doing 5-gallon batches. They take at least a week. There's enough yeast for 5 gallons, so it fermented that 1 gallon pretty quickly. So what I'm going to do is take some sulfite crushed Campton tablet here and use it to mix with some water, sanitize my jug here. So I'm going to rack my wine into, and I'm going to use that solution to try to sanitize and rinse the rest of my equipment here that I'm going to use. Of course I got to take a sample, see what my gravity is. The wine has indeed finished its primary fermentation. My gravity reading over here is approximately 0.994. So I'm going to go with. It's actually less dense than water, which would be 1.00. So I'll take my starting gravity of 1.094 and I subtract 0.994. It gives me a difference of 0.1. Take that number and you multiply it times a constant of 129, and that gives the approximate alcohol by volume. 12.9% alcohol by volume. So it's definitely finished fermenting. It has beautiful color. I really like that color. So what I have to do now is siphon what's in this bucket down into this glass 1-gallon jug. Now, I have several of these gallon jugs. I've gotten them from a restaurant. They once contained Tabasco hot sauce. It's been thoroughly delabeled and cleaned and sanitized with sulfites, along with my hydrometer jar and my tubing and the airlock and the stopper. It's what you call a small universal size stopper. It barely fits in a gallon jug, but it does fit. So I'm going to fill up my racking cane and tubing with water, and I'll just hold the racking cane up in the air, and I hold my thumb over the end of the tubing so it holds full of water. So what I have to do is simultaneously shove the racking cane into the bucket and then shove the tubing down into the jar, the glass bottle down there, and let go of the water so the water will rush out and I'll start the siphon and run the wine. So I get started filling that with water. I'm situated here getting ready to siphon, and I decided I need to pull that fruit bag out first and try to squeeze the juice out of it, get all the juice out I can, so when I start siphoning I'll have as much liquid in there as possible. So I'm going to do that, then get my siphon going. I have my racking cane and my tubing here full of water, so I need to get this siphon started. Here goes nothing. There it goes. I'm quickly siphoning out this wine here. So what I'm going to have to do is tilt my bucket so I can get every last bit. Then I'll have to watch very closely so I don't overfill my jug. The wine has been racked into the gallon jug. I had a little bit extra. So I have some samples to taste, which I've already tasted, and it's pretty good. Really no off flavors to it. Had just a little bit too much volume, but it turned out okay. See the yeast sediment that was left behind. So now I'm going to take this jug and let it sit for about a month and rack it again. I really don't know how many times I'll have to do that until it's clear, and then it'll be bottled. So I'll check back in about a month. The gallon jug's been sitting for over a month now, and it's time to rack it into another jug. Leave the sediment behind. You can see there's a layer of sediment formed in the bottom of the jug here. The wine itself is very clear. If it was bottled now, it would probably still develop some sediment in the bottles. But if you're not too picky about that, and you're just going to drink it in the near future, it could be bottled at this point if it was carefully siphoned off all that stuff in the bottom. The grape wines usually need a few rackings, and I want to store this in bottles for probably close to 2 years since it's a red wine. I'll probably drink 1 or 2 of them before they get that old. So I'm going to rack it at least one more time, maybe some more after that. I'll have to see how it looks. Since it's only a gallon, I may not need to rack it as many times as I do my bigger batches. So I'm going to fill up my siphon tube with water, get my siphon started. I've got all my equipment, my jug all sanitized with some sulfite solution. So I guess I better get started. This won't take long. I want to do this with as little splashing as possible. Try to get all the juice and none of the solids. Getting down there. The wine's been racked off the sediment. Left a layer behind. I actually overfilled it just a little bit due to the extra water in my siphon tube, I guess. So that gave me a little extra for a sample. And it has a very interesting flavor. Definitely has alcohol in it. Really interesting color. So I'm going to let this sit Another month is gone. It's late October now. The wine, although it's hard to tell from this angle, is very clear, very bright. Most grape wines I'll rack like probably 4 times, and it's usually close to 6 months by the time I bottle them. But since this is a small batch, only a gallon with only 2 pounds of grapes, and it's very clear, I don't want to lose any more racking it, so I'm going to go ahead and bottle it. But I have one question here. I don't know whether I'm going to bottle it dry as it is or sweeten it. If I bottle it dry, all I need to do is crush 1 Campton tablet and add it to the bucket here that I'm going to siphon into, and then run it into bottles. If I want to sweeten it, I'll have to add as much sugar as I want and sorbates to keep it from fermenting in the bottle. So I'm going to take a small sample here. Try to anyway. Get a straw and put some in a glass just to taste it. Trying to make too big of a mess. That's one thing about winemaking, you're pretty much guaranteed to make a mess at some point, so just try to stay calm and clean up the best you can. I sure wouldn't want to be doing any winemaking on a carpeted surface. I think I have enough. I'm really impressed by the color of this stuff. What a beautiful red. I think I'm going to bottle it dry. Oh man, that's good. For only having 2 pounds of grapes, it's got a lot of color, a lot of flavor. Pretty good kick too. It's pretty young though, so it'll be a little rough around the edges. Well, I've got bottles rounded up here, and what I'm going to do is make some sulfite solution. You can crush 1 Campton tablet in some water, or use about 1/8 of a teaspoon of some sulfite powder, mix in some water. I'm going to sanitize all this stuff. Got corks, tubing, racking cane, my handy double handle corker. I'm going to soak my corks a little too in some sulfite water. I've got 5 wine bottles. I keep foil on them, keep the dust out of them when they're in storage. I'll rinse them out with sulfite solution also. And when I rack this into the bucket, I'm going to crush 1 single Campton tablet and put in the bucket. And that's all I need to add for bottling. Now, if I wanted to sweeten this, I would probably add about 1/2 cup of sugar dissolved in about 1/4 cup of water, and I believe a 1/2 teaspoon of sorbates. Whenever you sweeten, you need to use sorbates so it doesn't re-ferment in the bottle. And that would probably be sweet enough, make it maybe semi-sweet. But this is delicious, and it's a really nice red European type grape, and I'm going to bottle it dry. Most of my wines I do sweeten, but this is a little different. So I better get started sanitizing, getting ready to siphon. I have my bottling bucket, racking cane, and tubing all sanitized with some sulfite solution, and my bottles have all been rinsed with sulfite solution. My corks are floating in some, along with the bottle filler, which I'll attach to the tubing when I get ready to fill bottles. And before I rack my wine into the bottling bucket, I have 1 Campton tablet here that I need to crush thoroughly and throw into the bucket. And after I do that, I'm going to fill up my cane and tubing with some water and get a siphon started out of this jug. I've crushed the one Campton tablet with the spoon. And I'm just going to throw it down here in the bucket. That way when the wine gets in, it'll swirl around and hopefully dissolve it. So now I need to get racking. Siphoning is in progress, and this is not going to take long. So I better turn the camera off. The wine's been racked into the bottling bucket. Didn't make much of a mess. The lack of sediment in the bottom just helps to back up my feeling that it's ready to be bottled. If you're still throwing a lot of sediment, you probably want to rack something again. It looks great, smells great, tastes great. I just need to get it put into some bottles. I have my tubing and bottle filler hooked up. Turn on the spigot and gravity keeps the tip shut until I push down the end of it. I'm going to try to fill bottles as much as possible, with as little oxygen as possible. So I'll run it up clear to the top. Then when you pull the wand out, it's as full as you can get it, pretty much. Oh, there it is. So I just need to finish filling all these. And get some corks in them. Here's the end result. 5/5 plus a nice large glass to sample for the winemaker. Turns out that gallon jugs hold more than a gallon if they're clear full, so you can get 5 bottles filled and have a nice sample left over. Well, this has been an interesting experiment. Red wines normally age for 2 years. So I'm going to lay these back and try not to drink them. It's going to be difficult because this sample here is delicious right now. I'm just so thoroughly impressed with these Regent grapes. I'm glad I picked them to grow. I may print some labels on these. I usually use removable stickers. Print labels on them so I can reuse the wine bottles easily. Well, that's all I got for now. Thanks for watching.